So my job is as a sub-editor, and English plays a really important role in this because what I have to do is check a variety of different texts for accuracy of spelling, grammar, fact-checking, but mainly the style of the language and what we would call house style, which is the style of the language that our particular company uses. Due to the diversity and the variety of the forms of English I'm using, they're all quite unique in how they work. For example, if I'm working on something like a transcript, it will have certain conventions that you wouldn't find in other texts. For example, we'd have to introduce the speaker, and you might use things such as ellipsis to show the gap in speech, which you probably wouldn't find in any other type of text that I work on. In terms of things like lesson plans and teacher resources, there are certain things that appear in there that wouldn't appear anywhere else. Things like bullet points and things that help the instructions. I work on things like news articles, and the structure of that is very specific. You have certain expectations for reading news, and that might be things like short paragraphs, and the way that the information is structured is very unique to how news articles are. A lot of what I do is changing structure. Ultimately, the aim is to make things quite readable. It's no good having a piece of text that's really interesting if it's really hard to read and some of the language gets lost. So I would have to break things into smaller paragraphs that are easy to sort of digest as a reader. I would sometimes have to change the order of the paragraphs. If sometimes the important information comes lower down, I know that that's wrong and I have to move that to the intro or somewhere higher up in the text. So it's really thinking about the content and also the flow of the language moving from paragraph to paragraph. Adapting the tone and register of the text for our audience is really important. I work on pieces that go into three different places with three different audiences. So it might be primary school texts, secondary school texts, and then resources for teachers. So all three of those audiences have different expectations of what they're going to receive when they read some of our stuff. And how we make that the correct style and register and tone can depend on the type of sentences we use, but also the lexical choices we make. So the specific words that we use has a big impact on the tone and the register of the piece. So, for example, I worked on a news story for primary school students recently, and it was called Poo Bus. It was about a poo bus. When we did that same story for secondary, we would probably do it in a certain way. We would call it a bus fueled on human waste. And then if I was writing about this resource for a teacher, so they understood what poo bus means, we would call it a eco-friendly form of transport that uses recycled waste. So just changing the particular words used really changes the tone and the style of the language. I would have to avoid at all costs publishing anything that has any inaccuracies, so that might be in terms of spelling and in terms of grammar. This is particularly important if you're doing something that's going into schools, because obviously in education it's really important to get everything as correct as possible, particularly if you're doing a piece of work which is for an English grammar module. You want to make sure that everything in that has the correct grammar and spelling.